Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Varga? Here. Commissioner Marecki? Commissioner Baidoon?
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson?
Here.
Chair Kinlock?
Present.
You have a quorum present.
Next item on the agenda.
B, Chairman's remarks.
I have no remarks at this time. Next item on the agenda.
C, approval of the July 19, 2022 meeting minutes.
So
Move
moved.
approval.
Been moved and supported to approve the meeting minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? This item stands approved. Next item on the agenda.
Item D1, under new business, an update from James Heath, Carter Fisher, Jay Shander, Bill Rath, and Victoria Ennis Edwards regarding the status of the criminal justice complex.
I see that James Heath is absent and Carter Page, would you be standing in his absence? I said, what did I say? Carter Fisher, right? Yeah. What did I say?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Carter Fisher with Wayne County Corporation Counsel. As you noted, Commissioner Kinlock, James Heath has been called away this afternoon, so I'll be doing a James Heath brief impersonation right now. Yeah, so we do actually have a few substantive updates on construction at the CJC. One of the biggest highlights that I wanted to note for you is that we're nearing completion on the sheriff's building, which will also house our administrative teams and prosecutors. So we're expecting that building to be done by the end of this month or early in October at the latest. We're expecting a substantive update on that from the building team next week, actually. But that's, and I believe that some commissioners at least had an opportunity to tour. You would have seen on the tour that building is, it looks like a building inside and out. We're moving furniture in there rapidly, and we're just working on a few finishings in that building to be done. So that will be the first building on site that will be totally complete. But we're also making good construction progress in our other buildings. A lot of painting going on everywhere, which is one of the last steps before we move furniture in most places. We've received detention grade furniture at both the ADF and the JDF. That's being installed. And we're working on a lot of the public facing areas in all of those buildings, especially in terms of countertops and areas where the public will be interacting with county employees. So those are the main substantive construction updates. We also had a brief environmental update. We received some cost estimates from ROC in the last month that they believe to be unbudgeted environmental costs that we would split 50-50 with them. We're still discussing sort of what responsibility the county should bear and whether these items should be properly considered unbudgeted environmental costs or whether they should have.
What are those potential numbers? What are those conversations centered around?
So there's sort of two main nexuses that we've focused on. The first is our northern offsite parking lot. That's the offsite lot where I don't know if you would have seen this or not, but it might have been where you parked on the tour. They had a bunch of their construction trailers sitting there until very recently. Those have moved. They've started doing some of the construction and excavation work there necessary to build that parking lot out. And they've discovered some contaminated soils under that area that they that they previously did not inform us of. And so they're determining sort of how much we should excavate to safely build on top of this parking lot, and then B, we're discussing whether the county should bear 50% of the costs or some lesser number.
Was it their initial responsibility to tell us as it relates to the footprint, all of the environmental data that we needed to know to move this project forward?
So there was a responsibility in terms of environmental disclosures at the outset.
So wouldn't that, okay, from my just hearing that right there, that should be the guiding point, and it's from a layman's.
And that is actually this sort of central to our discussions right now. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on how we would argue that with them, but that is central to our discussions right now, whether the county should bear any responsibility for those costs, as they could have been known ahead of time and maybe should have been and were known ahead of time.
So any determination in that, and I know you all are negotiating, Are you in conversation with at this point, is our staff, Mr. Abbo and our council, are they involved in those conversations, or at what point in this process would, they be engaged?
We haven't engaged commission staff on these issues yet. We're sort of just exploring them initially with Rock right now. Certainly before we arbitrate, if that's necessary, we would involve commission staff on any of those decisions.
And yeah, absolutely keep them in a loop earlier, sooner than later.
Sure.
I'm glad. Is this their first time hearing about this?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, but thank you for being forthcoming.
Sure.
And are there any other forthcoming stuff?
Yes. Yes. So we have other environmental costs related to mostly underground work done on site. And we're also in discussions with Rock that they believe that the county share of that should be roughly $1.2 million in terms of environmental remediation work. We're in discussions with Rock about how much of that really should be considered unbudgeted environmental costs versus costs that the project would have had to bear anyway, which would make them Rock's responsibility. So again, on both, we're sort of just now getting past the surface level presentation that they've made to us, and we're engaging them in further discussions and negotiations about what level of responsibility the county should bear.
When this deal was announced, it was announced as something that was going to absolutely have the county looking pretty solid and at the on the other end of the of this CJC being built. And what I'm hoping is not happening, because we all read the papers and understand Rock's footprint in our community, and they're very expensive foots in our community, or feet in our community. And so I'm hoping that as we're at the tail end of this, things are not being readjusted as far as where their heads are, as far as prioritizing how they're going to allocate their resources, because we're at the tail end of this one here. And many of the other projects, they have a lot more investment they have to be involved in. So I'm hoping that, but not necessarily saying that utilizing short end of the stick, but I'm just hoping that that stick, is, seen from the same vantage point it was when we first did this deal.
Yeah, and I would say Rock has been very forthcoming with us, and they've been working with us on these issues as we've broached them with them. So I certainly share your concerns and hope the same. But I do think that Rock will continue to work with us on these items.
Thank you. I think that, like I said, it was a great deal. The community was like, wow. It was, as far as being announced, and even as I've been on this committee, it seems to have been working out well. And so, yeah, let's hope that it continues along those lines. Okay, want to ask any question from any of the board members or staff? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carter, when we approved the budget, we put in I think it was $22.8 million for completion of the jail, but that was with an understanding that that the administration was still trying to get their arms around additional costs that may be included, some of the closeout type of things. And you just pointed to one of them, which was environmental, which we were not aware of. How soon do you think it might be that the administration will be able to present something to us that gets us completely around what the costs of the and completion of the jail might be?
I'd hesitate to give you an exact date on that, but it is something that we're working on every day. Environmental costs, we're hoping to have our arms around that by year end. To the extent that there aren't any further undiscovered ones, but as we're approaching, especially the parking lot paving, that's where the last environmental cost should be coming up. And we don't really anticipate too much more in that area. In terms of closeout costs and sort of contractual services that will have to be shifted from our current facilities to the new one, that's also something that we're actively involved in. I would guess closer to the beginning of next year, we'll have our hands around that.
And how soon will it be before we actually start putting together a final punch list for completion of the jail? Are we closing in on that timing?
We are in fact closing in on that time. So as I mentioned, the sheriff's building that's being done right now, there's actual punch lists going in for that building. And as each building is completed, that's when we're doing the punch list. So we're doing sort of a phased approach so that we're not trying to do one sort of giant punch list at the end. So Rock's contractors have been doing punch list work while wrapping up the substantial completion of the sheriff's building. County representatives, both CGL and folks from inside the county will be going through the building afterwards to complete our punch list and give them further punch list work to just finish out that building. And we'll do that with each building as the phase completion continues.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Vice Chair Anderson.
Thank you. Carter, I just wondered if you can tell us when we're going to start seeing some of these other contracts that there was a lot of talk about it a few month or two ago about how we were just going to get slammed with all these contracts that we needed to push through real quick. And I don't think we've seen any yet. So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
So we're actually hoping to have some next month at the latest, a fair batch coming through. We have some that are submitted into TCM right now and are clearing approvals on the administration side. A number of AV contracts in particular that we feel are sort of time sensitive, both in terms of supply chain and knowing that a lot of microchips and things like that are delayed. And so we're trying to keep those on schedule, but also in terms of having the courts built out as soon as possible and being able to perform court remotely, especially. So we are bringing a number of contracts by October at the latest. I'd hesitate to put a number on it, but I know a fair number of contracts are coming in the pipeline right now, and we're negotiating a fair number of contracts as well that will be coming to you by the end of the year.
And since you mentioned the supply chain, have we been affected in a negative way, the completion date or any portion of the project right now by that?
The completion date has not been pushed back since last we spoke. We're expecting the buildings to be completed pretty much by end of February, early March next year. And then our move-in will start after that. So August, September of next year is when we expect to have move-in pretty much completed. So we haven't experienced too many negative supply chain issues right now in terms of construction. Rock and Barton Mallow have been pretty on the ball in that regard.
Do we have a timeline right now of when move-ins will take place at this point, or even a rough draft of what those are going to be, the dates of the different departments that'll be using the facility?
I would say we have a very rough draft right now. We're still actually working with the end users on sort of all the, no pun intended, the moving pieces of a move-in. But we are sort of cognizant of time is growing short on that as well. So we will have a draft of that shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from any of the committee members? Any questions from staff? Okay. Mr. Fisher, is there any additional information or any other? I know that the prosecutor was supposed to be making some presentations or comments. As far as any of the other end users who's here, I know we have former Judge Virgil Smith here representing the courts, I would believe. Okay.
Yes.
Victoria Ennis, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
Through the chair, Victoria Ennis Edwards, Director of Wayne County Human Relations. Very short report. The numbers are status quo at this point. We are still at 58% for Wayne County business spend, which is phenomenal. And we are trending right now at 34% for Wayne County residents on the project. So it's really not fluctuated. In about 10 business days, we'll have the next report. So we expect to see a little bit of an increase in those numbers, and I will be back with hopefully new numbers next go round.
So I know a number of the existing contracts are transferring over to the new facility. Are there any new contracts that will be needed to be voted on by the commission? Any new contracts? And then what are the timeline on some of those existing contracts expiring?
So right now we're in the middle of literally organizing all of those. We're looking at the contracts for all the end users, looking to make sure that there will be no gap. Some, if we need to have an amendment, do we need new contracts? So we will have a better understanding in the next 30 days. We're literally lining it all up, but we are on that piece. And just like Carter talked about, you are literally going to have an influx of contracts coming for CJC. That's part of what we're doing. We're doing a lot of the behind the scenes prep. And I would see in the next quarter, we are going to try to have all of those through. So when we have substantial completion, the majority of those contracts are going to be lined up into you, if not completed by you. So when it's time for move-in, we're not doing a avalanche of contracts. It'll be onesie, twosies that have been working their way through the system.
It's important for me, and I'm sure many others, that you get it to our staff in a timely fashion. And even because I think at one point we asked for a list of the contracts that you all are considering or perusing over that would eventually be brought forward. So we have an advanced awareness of what's going to be coming down the pipeline. So the sooner you're able to bring our staff into the mix, into the conversation, I think the better it is for us to be able to move those contracts forward, for them to be able to begin asking and formulating their questions around the direction of how these contracts are being, language is being developed.
Oh, absolutely. So I've noted that again, and then also understand, and part of preparing for that list is understanding some of them don't need to be new contracts. We want to maybe just extend it through the move, and then maybe it has to be put out again onto the streets. So we're trying to organize it instead of just throwing alphabet soup at you. We'd like to give it to you with a little organization.
That makes sense. Yep. It's my opinion that we should, any contracts where their expiration date, you have to extend a little. We should always err on the sign of not extending it too far out, so we can, just make sure we're getting the best, bang for our buck. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. We just want to ensure that there's no gap of service with the move and that we can continue.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And no further comments from staff or anyone else. Okay, at this point, the next item on the agenda?
Through the chair, we have Mark Hindelang's hand up on Zoom.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes, it can be recognized.
Thank you. My name is Mark Hindelang. I'm the Chief of Information and Technology of the Prosecutor's Office. The prosecutor asked me, and I want a session to appear here and bring 3 issues and an idea to you. The 3 issues through the chair are to make sure that we are addressing parking and endeavoring to make it free for staff to park at or near the facility. The second issue goes to something that's essential to our office and to the design decisions that we made in moving into the office. We agreed that we would be a fully digital office and paperless or paper light for move-in. In order to do that, we need to have our current paper scanned. And we have identified a vendor, but are unable to use that vendor, even though they're being used by the courts because of the purchasing ordinance. We're working through that with procurement to make sure that we can get and make use of that MyDeal, or I guess it's not a MyDeal contract, but it's a state of Michigan vendor in the new fiscal year. So we are still at 0% files scanned. And this is a project that should have been well underway and nearing completion. We do have a budget request for $1.5 million for scanning to get our active files scanned in this next year. And hopefully that is approved and we can move forward so that there's no delay in moving to the new building. The third issue is a connection to 36th District Court. 36th District Court is the busiest district court in the state. We have a large number of staff that goes back and forth to our office right now. It's fairly easy, just walk across Gratiot and you're there. When we're in the CJC, that will not be so easy. And so there needs to be a plan for a shuttle service or some way of moving our staff, the defense bar, court staff, between the CJC and 36th District Court, because that's a huge amount of traffic. And we cannot ask our staff to pay for parking at CJC, pay for parking at 36th District Court, and have the demands of moving back and forth put squarely on their shoulders. Those are the three issues. The one idea is to talk to the city and try and open Russell Street between CJC and Eastern Market to open up that marketplace, those lunch venues, and make the CJC a little less of an island unto itself, connect it to those great resources down in Eastern Market. But that is what I have to share. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, my question is a couple of these, and specifically when you talk about the parking and the footprint and the mobility issues, those are conversations that should have been had early on, like day one. Those are like day one issues, and we're now at the end. And I'm just wondering, were they raised at the beginning? And then two, Mr. Fisher, I'm asking you, were they raised in the issue? Were those issues raised early in the discussions? And as far as the operations of the prosecutor's office moving into the CJC, and those sound like some absolute day one discussed issues.
So we've been discussing parking, particularly for a long time. Prior to day one, we had a parking study commissioned to inform us on parking needs and sort of how to best serve the county with those. As you know, we had an original concession agreement with ROC that we've since purchased from ROC. They were going to operate the parking, and they would have charged employees, and we purchased the parking with an eye to having control and potentially giving free parking to employees. And so that's certainly been one of our goals. And if it's fiscally doable for the county, that's absolutely an end goal of ours, to have enough parking for employees and to have it be free, and do the same for the public. That is exactly what we want to do. And in an ideal world, we would do that.
So you'll get with the prosecutor's office and work that out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of issues in terms of Russell Street or connecting to 36th District Court, but it's certainly something we're happy to discuss. I believe James Heath has come here before and talked about how we'd like to work with DDOT and the city of Detroit in making sure we have more robust bus service to and from the CJC. And so we'd be happy to involve them in those conversations as well, since I think that sort of directly impacts city of Detroit interests on top of ours. So yeah, we're happy to talk about mobility, parking, whenever. And it's something that is at the forefront of our minds currently.
The number one and number two issue, those were budget issues. The budget we just approved today. I know that Chair Varga said there's ongoing conversation between staff and the administration regarding some technical amendments that would be brought forward. I'm not sure if that's part of those discussions, but if not, definitely staff has the notes, and so you all have the notes, and so I would imagine that you all will do what y'all do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And yes.
Mr. Chair, I just had one last question. Carter, and I don't know if this has any impact on the CJC, but the change to 375 over there, is that going to have any impact on us whatsoever?
We don't believe so at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Merrick.
I don't know what it entails to open up Russell Street, because I don't know where they're referring to, but it would seem like if that could happen, it'd be good, because there's like no restaurants or anything around the jail right now, right?
Not much around the jail other than the concession that we put directly into it. The CJC isn't actually too far from Midtown though.
And there's a lot of restaurants right on Woodward. I eat all over there all the time.
Right. So there is some space, but I realize going back towards downtown, it might get a little bit more shaky. So we're certainly happy to work with the city and talk to them about that as well.
Actually, it's better, more selection around Midtown. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. So the prosecutor's office, are there any other issues? So you heard that that Mr. Fisher and Arts, they'll circle back with you all.
Yes, and we have many meetings with Mr. Fisher, so we will continue our conversations. Thank you very much.
Can you give us an update next month?
Yes, we'll do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, next item, you have a question? Next item on the agenda?
Item E, such other matters as may be properly submitted before the committee.
I know of none. Next item.
Item F, public comments.
Do you see anyone on Zoom? Their hands raised to speak at this meeting? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to address this committee meeting?
I don't see any hands on Zoom.
Is anyone out there in the audience? Okay, let's see none either. Next item on the agenda.
Through the chair, no emails have been received.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That part too. Yes, any next item on the agenda.
Adjournment.
Been moved and supported to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed.